Welcome to the Enlighten Up podcast, where I am going to take you into a deep exploration of what it means to exist in this current reality. We are going to raise your vibes, open your mind, expand your heart, and dive deep into the wondrous mysteries and possibilities of this lifetime. There's been a spiritual catalyst that has set in motion the awakening process of many across the globe to return to the knowingness of self and unite what has been separated. Together, we're going to bring light into that darkness. We're going to remember the joy of living. But most of all, we're going to turn up the volume of our own eternal power and do the thing we're here to do. Hey everyone, welcome to the very first episode of my new reality recap series, Awakened Edition. This is where I'm going to have a lot of fun in bringing you a whole new show in my podcast that's going to take a look at a couple of my favorite reality TV shows and really pick them apart and look at them through the lens of spiritual awakeness, healing, all that good stuff. We're going to use these shows as content canvases to give us some material, some content here to work with and highlight where, a lot of things break down and also where people might be doing things right. And we're going to learn from what others are doing, and it's going to be a lot of fun. This show is not meant to be taken seriously. So if you've got a spiritual stick up your butt, you are in the wrong place. So either pull it out or you may want to leave the show. So right now we're going to recap both the latest episode of Summer House and The Valley. And I'm going to start with Summer House because I absolutely am loving season 8. I think this is one of their best seasons so far. Last year was really difficult to watch. I found that the last few seasons, it's just been a lot of fighting, a lot of toxicity, and there's been zero fun. And when you think about going to your summer house on the weekends, it should be fun. So they've really done a good job by bringing in a couple new cast members. West and Jesse in particular have been a fantastic addition to this show, in my opinion. I love them on this show. I think they've been great at bringing in a little more masculine energy because it has been heavily too many females on this show. I think the women on the show, for the most part, are amazing. But in order to have like a really balanced show, you do want that balanced masculine and feminine energy, and you want the different points of view. So after I do the recap of Summer House, we're going to go to The Valley. And of course, I have the timestamps in the show notes. So if you want to just jump straight to one of the particular shows, you can do that down below. So why don't we jump into Summer House and get into some of the details? So this has been interesting because for those of you who may not know, before Summer House aired 2 months ago, because we're now on episode 13. So actually this has been going on for 3 months now. We all knew that Carl had ended his engagement with Lindsay, and Lindsay claimed it was a blindside. And, everyone was so against Carl about like, how could you do that to her on TV? Because they picked cameras back up. He had cameras come into their apartment and film him breaking the engagement off. And of course, Lindsay went on Nick Viall's podcast and did a whole like PR stunt on that, claiming that, she was completely blindsided. And so from that point until it started to air, everyone was really team Lindsay and against Carl, which if you're going to notice in the show, I am not team anyone. I am going to be really looking at this because I just don't like the whole internet thing of like, I'm team this, I'm team that. I just think that's really juvenile, and we're not going to do that here. But what I am going to do is I'm definitely going to tell you when I'm siding more with what someone's going through or the other person based on that particular scenario, but also then tie it into the big picture. And so relationships are going to be a big theme around this, but we're also going to have some fun because In some of these episodes, we're talking about astrology, we're talking about plant medicine journeys, specifically, especially when we get into the valley. But let's cut into Summer House, because Summer House, this week we are picking up where we left off the week before, which was Amanda had reached out to Kyle and had expressed to him that she really wanted to maybe take some time to explore her own passions, see what she really wanted to do, what made her happy, because she's felt like she's lost a lot of her identity in her relationship with Kyle. She feels like everyone just sees her as Kyle's girlfriend or Kyle's wife now that they're married. And everything that she's done has been for Kyle or his business. So she's quit her job so that she could work for him as his creative director. She wants to move to New Jersey, but he's not ready. She wants to have kids, but he's not ready. And so like a lot of stuff has been very Kyle centric focused. And she's really feeling like, when do I get to have what I want? And I totally understand where she's coming from, but this dynamic is not, there's a lot of nuances here. And I feel like a lot of other shows don't really pick up on some of the things that I'm going to share today. So what happened last weekend was, Amanda brought it up. Kyle totally took it personally, and of course only took it from his perspective of her. Basically, he was thinking what she was saying was, I want to leave the company Loverboy and just explore my own thing, which is not what she's saying. She just wants to go and explore her identity and her passions because she's really feeling unhappy and unfulfilled, which, a lot of us can relate to on this journey. So we start with Amanda in the kitchen, and she's feeling like she's just saying to Lindsay, like, I just feel like I can't win. And Kyle's outside with Carl and Danielle in the backyard saying, he's just not understanding where, Amanda's at and wanting to fulfill her life. He's like, why does it have to be outside of the company? So we're back in this backyard with Kyle and Carl and Danielle, and Kyle actually says it disgusts him how much how Amanda is speaking, which I don't like that when he says that. And I should say, prior to this episode starting, the way it ended on the last episode, he literally called her a bitch. And anytime your husband is calling you a bitch, never mind in behind closed doors, but then in front of your friends and then on national TV, like it was just a triple whammy of really bad behavior on Kyle's part. Like it was just not his best moment at all. And so Kyle says he feels like he's putting in all this effort for nothing. And Carl's there saying, I'm letting him know, like, dude, I see you. I recognize all the effort you're putting in. Which is interesting because in this moment, I'm feeling like Carl's starting to use this as an opportunity to project his stuff with Lindsay into the moment. So because he's so bad at communicating his own feelings with Lindsay, because he's so scared of confronting her and what that means, like he's very conflict avoidant. He's using this opportunity where Kyle's venting about his feelings, and he's using it as an opportunity to kind of vent his, when really he should just be talking to Lindsay. But anyway, this is where, he's just saying like, he doesn't feel like he's getting the same kind of like needs met by Lindsay, and so he's really relating to Kyle in this time. But then it goes back to Amanda and Lindsay in the kitchen, and Amanda saying like she feels like for the first years, all she saw was like, she's like, all people saw me was as his girlfriend, and then Kyle's wife, and I work for Loverboy, it's his company, even though like Kyle thinks it's our company, which it is because she does own part of it. She just doesn't feel like she's got her own identity. So then it cuts back to Danielle and Carl and Kyle in the backyard. And Kyle has now left and he's gone into his car just to have a complete meltdown. And Danielle is here saying, imagine if you built something from the ground up and put your entire life into it and no one appreciates you. She was like, that would be the worst feeling in the world. And this is so bizarre because what Danielle is doing in this moment makes no sense at all, because Amanda has clearly given so much of her energy to the business. She has she has put her entire life on hold, everything that she has wanted, and put it towards Kyle. So Danielle is really way off base by even going here. I know what she's just trying to like be kind of, she's trying to empathize with Kyle, but she's going about it in the wrong way. And so, she goes over to the car to console Kyle, and he's explaining how he doesn't understand how Amanda is questioning why he puts the amount of time that he does into the business. And I guess in their conversation, she has sometimes expressed to him, I'm not a morning person. I think in their dynamic, Kyle's working 18 hours a day, he's saying, and she's, I clearly not. And it's not that she needs to be, because I don't think anyone should be working 18 hours a day and sustaining, it's not sustainable. It really isn't. But listen, they're two different people. They work in two different ways. Now, I will say that for a long period of time, I've always thought that Amanda is a little bit lazy. And that's only because I am coming from the perspective of a business owner, and I hustle the shit out of my work, and I will work the same kind of hours similar to Kyle. I won't necessarily work 18 hours a day, but I'll work like 12 to 15 hours sometimes, not consistently, but there's times when your business calls for it. And I've always thought when I hear her saying, well, I'm not a morning person, I'm like, morning person, that's not an excuse. Like, you are an adult, you have responsibilities, you have to get up and do stuff. Like, it's not like, oh, like maybe when I'm ready to get up, I'll get up. And I've always felt that way, but I'm starting to understand now that clearly, that was only part of the conversation and you're not getting the full picture. And I can understand now that she's clearly working and she's doing work for the company. She does incredible work for their branding on their creative side. But I also am understanding from Amanda's perspective that, she's feeling a little dead inside. Who has the motivation to get up when you're not doing what you love? And Kyle's clearly not hearing her express her needs and desires in these moments. And so Kyle's in this tunnel vision kind of place where he's in survival mode and he can't hear any of it. And she's just trying to say, hey, I need a little something for me. And he just doesn't understand what that means. And so basically, it cuts, as they're okay. So Danielle's in this car, like she's like trying to console him. And then it cuts to the scene in the kitchen where everyone's just eating their chicken nuggets. Lindsay's cooking all this food for them, like heating up frozen food. And then it cuts back to the backyard where, Carl's putting the burgers on the barbecue and Danielle is with him. And, she's trying to put herself in Kyle's shoes and saying, it's like heartbreaking. It's got to be so difficult. And Carl's like, yeah, it's brutal. And Danielle says, wouldn't it be so bad if your partner in life doesn't celebrate you, or worse, says, cool, great, don't love it? And then Carl says, yeah, I know. Trust me. It's like, it's crushing. And, I just, in this moment, it's like neither of these two people are equipped to be, when I say they're not equipped, they're just so far off base is what I want to say. They're so far off base for offering any sound advice at this moment, because Carl's totally caught up in his own drama and now he's using this as a place of projection. And Danielle is totally in her own CEO mode, but she's totally not taking into account anything that Amanda has done, which she's done a lot for this company. And she is so far from what Danielle is saying here. And so Lindsay has, so basically what Carl and Lindsay going through has nothing to do with what Kyle and Amanda are going through. And so, yeah, so, so basically then you cut back to the kitchen, all the food comes into the kitchen, everyone's eating, but Jesse now leaves and goes up to his room. He's actually quite emotional. He has a huge doctor's appointment coming up in a couple days on the Tuesday where, he had to deal with testicular cancer and he's coming up to his 5-year mark and all of his 1-year tests have been cancer free. And it's getting to the point where like, if you hit the 5-year mark, this is where, if you don't have it, you're pretty much out of the woods, and it's very rare that it will come back. But the problem is that he has felt a lump, I think, in one of his testicles. And so he's really scared about this upcoming appointment, but he's not really telling anyone about it. So he leaves, and then everyone's like, "Where's Jesse?" And Wes is like, "Oh, I'm going to go check on him." And so, this is Wes goes up to Jesse's room and he walks in, and they have a really cute bro moment here. I really love these two together. They're just so cute. And West is really good. He like kind of pulls Jesse in, and he's like, "Bro, like you can't run away from this." And so he's like, telling him basically that, you got to be able to wear some of these emotions. You can't just hide them. And Jesse's just expressing how he's just not used to being emotional. He doesn't know how to deal with these emotions. And um Wes tells him, like, you can't run away from this. And he's like, well, I was hoping I could. And, I totally get this because I've had to deal with a potential cancer scare. And I think this is a very common thing that a lot of us go through, where when there is a really big disease that a lot of people like, the main way of healing this is to go in through a very severe and drastic healing of chemo, radiation, which a lot of people, like I know many people that are listening to my show, they're like, that's not the route I'm going to go. I want to try and heal it a different way that's not so aggressive on the body, that's not going to kill all of my cells. And so what do? We're like, well, I'd rather just maybe not know yet, because as soon as I know, I can't run away from that. So I get what's kind of going on here. And so, he just opens up here to West about it. Just, he's not comfortable, and he gets really emotional. And West tells him, like, you're going through one of the biggest moments in your life here right now. And maybe, you can't pretend like you're just cool with cancer the way you pretend you're cool with relationships, which is an interesting point that West made here, because Jesse has been, saying he wants a relationship, but basically, he's kind of playing the field on the weekends, and then he goes on some dates with these women during the week, and then he's not happy. And so he just does this cycle over and over. And I think, it's like, I think deep down, Jesse wants something, but he's also really scared to commit. There's something about his emotions that he's not really willing to get in tuned with right now. There's something emotional coming up. And of course, if you've got like a huge cancer scare, I would think that he's using his summer and women right now to kind of distract him from the emotional upheaval that's likely taking part inside of him as this date is getting closer and closer. And so then it cuts to everyone getting ready to go out. Like, so half the house is going out to the bars, which is basically all the guys and Danielle, and all the girls. Other girls are basically staying in, and everyone comes home at 3:30 in the morning, kicking down the door. So we cut out to the next morning, and this is where let's get into the Lindsay and Carl situation here, because this is a crazy thing that's happening on this season. And it's so fascinating to watch this, because for anyone who doesn't know, Carl has been on the show for a very long time, almost, I think, since the beginning, if maybe he wasn't on the first year, I can't remember. But basically, he's dealt with alcoholism, and he's now in AA. He's coming up to his 1 year of sobriety, and or he's maybe just hit his 1 year of sobriety while they're filming this. But he also lost his brother to suicide. I believe it was suicide. And so big issues he's had to go through, a lot of grief, a lot of loss, a lot of reevaluation of his life, and not wanting to go down the same path, and really kind of looking at, like, why is he living his life the way he is? And so, in the beginning of this season, it's important to note that everyone was like team Lindsay on the internet, because they're like, how, Carl, could you do this to her? How could you blindside her? But then it became very glaringly obvious that Lindsay also was not treating Carl in the way that a fiance should be treating her fiance if they're getting ready to get married, by literally triggering him and calling him out on national TV as if he were back into drugs and alcohol. And so he's dealt with addictions with cocaine, with alcohol, and she's called him Cocaine Carl on national TV. And so when this happened, everyone was like all up in roar and being like, oh my God, Lindsay, how could you do this? How could you? No wonder, like, what did you think was going to happen? How could you, like, say this to him? Which I completely agree with. That was so horrible. Like that was just not the right thing to do and how to go about it. But what we're now seeing unfold is we're also seeing a very toxic side of Carl in this relationship. And basically, what it boils down to is these two, thank God they didn't get married, because these two should not be together. They should not be husband and wife, and they should not be raising children together by any sort of means, because their communication style is horrendous. So let's dive into their communication style. So it's the morning. It's now this, I think it's the Sunday morning. And so they're waking up, and Lindsay wants to talk to him about the conversation they had in the kitchen on Saturday morning, where Carl had come back from a potential career meeting where he's trying to figure out his career. So he hasn't worked in almost a year. And so Lindsay's been kind of covering all the expenses, and he's been making a little money here and there, I think from branding deals, whatever. But Lindsay's been pretty much bringing in the bread. She's been like carrying both of them. And also on top of that, she's the one planning pretty much the entire wedding. So she's had a lot on her plate to deal with, and doesn't really seem like Carl's really been stepping up anywhere in there. And he's just trying to figure out his life. But Lindsay gave him a deadline, and the deadline was the end of this summer, and rightfully so, because if she's going to be getting married to him, she wants to know that he's going to have a job and he's going to be contributing financially to their family. And so now the pressure's on for Carl to get his career situation sorted out, but he's having a lot of anxiety because I don't think he knows what he wants to do, where he wants to go. And let's be honest, we have to call a spade here. Carl, I think he has some disillusionment with his performance level in his career in the past. He used to work for Kyle at Loverboy, and from what Kyle had shared, he wasn't exactly the greatest performer. But then if you hear from Carl's side, he was a great employee. So I'm sure somewhere in the middle, there's the truth in all that. But, he's been fired from other jobs before too. So we know that he's not the greatest performer when it comes to his career. So I feel like it's all about like, he's so lost, right? So, in this conversation at this kitchen counter that they had, Carl got really triggered because Lindsay was questioning him about the decisions he's making for his career, and rightfully so. Whereas Carl just wants her to be the cheerleader and be positive and be like, hey, I'm excited for you. You finally maybe have an opening, which I can understand to some degree. But he's also like not really doing much, and he's not really offering her very clear information. And she's just trying to say like, hey, in the past, all of these issues had come up, and these were all the issues that we needed to do, that you were scared of and that you didn't want to face again. And so I'm just making sure that you're not going down that similar path. She's being a very supportive fiance in this moment, if you ask me. And yeah, no, she's not being the cheerleader, but it's because Carl's not willing to ask the hard questions right now. So Lindsay has to for him. So that conversation, she got totally gaslit by Carl. So now the next morning, where they're at right now in their bedroom, she's like, let's talk about that conversation. So basically this is where Carl begins to really lose the audience, right? And Lindsay is opening up by saying like, I understand you need me to be more positive. You need that positive reinforcement. You need that cheerleader. You need me to be excited for you about your career. But she's like, but I felt like yesterday's conversation was more about being informative and, asking some of the harder questions. And like I said, that's exactly like she was completely valid in that. So Carl then expresses how he's feeling very defeated in his career and what he's doing, which is understandable, because he's in a very transitionary place. He's gone through a lot. Like I said, he's lost his brother to suicide. He's now gone into, rehab for he's gone sober for drug addiction, for alcohol. He's California sober. So there's been a lot on his plate, and he's just trying to figure himself out, which, I can totally understand, when you're in that place, but you're also about to make huge life decisions. Like maybe you shouldn't have made these really big life decisions about getting married if you weren't completely clear on your career and your sobriety. Like, I'm sorry, but when him and Lindsay got together, it was within his first year of sobriety. And it is known that you do not get into a relationship in your first year of sobriety, because now the time and energy is not only on you, it's on someone else in your life. And during that time, Lindsay had gone sober with him for like, I think 4 or 5 months, just, to be supportive. But also she's like, oh, let me just, try it out and do it. And it's not like she was doing it because that's what she was going to do for the rest of her life, but she was just trying to be supportive. And it was a nice gesture on her part. And I think she was wanting to do it for herself as well. But I think it also created some false pretenses of what Carl's expectations of Lindsay were going to be down the road, because that's not who Lindsay's going to be for the rest of her life. And so the real question becomes like, can you be married to someone who drinks if you're sober? And that might not be something that Carl's able to do. And these are really big questions. This is, some people who are sober can handle that. But I don't think Carl is someone who really can, especially Lindsay, like she loves to have fun. And so this creates an environment for Carl that's not exactly supportive for him. So I understand that from his standpoint. But he's going on and he's saying he feels defeated about his career because he just doesn't know where he's at and he's not sure where his purpose lies. And he's very insecure. And so because of his insecurity, he's becoming extremely sensitive to everything Lindsay is saying. So he's internalizing every constructive criticism that Lindsay's giving him and actually helping him by asking the big questions. And he's internalizing it as, you're not supporting me, which is not what's happening. But because he's so insecure right now, this is what's happening. And so he says, it makes me feel like I can't do anything right when you criticize me. And that's pretty much because, well, Carl, you're not really doing much. Like, Carl's really not been doing much. I don't know what he's been doing for the last year, but it just feels like because finally he got a deadline, that now he's kind of under the gun and now he's feeling the pressure. And then of course he's also feeling the pressure, like, do I even want to marry Lindsay? And so that's going on in the background. But of course, Lindsay is not even aware that he's even questioning getting married to her. And so right now, he wants her to be soft. Okay. He's like, I just want you to be soft. I need some kindness. I need some tenderness. And I'm just sitting here like, Carl, you cannot ask your woman to be soft and tender when you are not leading her, when you are not stepping into your own masculine energy. He has no clarity. He has no clear direction. He has no sense of purpose. These are all masculine qualities and he is lacking all of them. And yet he's still wanting Lindsay to be soft and tender and nurturing. And it's like, to be quite honest, I don't think this is what Carl needs in this moment. Carl needs freaking boot camp. He needs masculine freaking boot. He needs someone to yell and put him down on the floor and tell him to give him 20. Like, this is crazy. Carl is, for lack of a better word, and this is where, he's way too much in his feminine energy right now. Okay. He's way too much in his feminine energy. And so because it's causing Lindsay to default into her masculine energy. Now, to Carl's defense, Lindsay easily defaults into her masculine energy. It's something she needs to work on in becoming a little softer, a little more feminine, especially the kind of man that she wants. She's like, I want a man who's going to lead me. Well, if you want a man who's going to lead you, a guy who's in his masculine energy is not going to want a woman who's in her masculine energy. And so she does need to soften. But in this moment, I have to be fair. Carl has done nothing to create an environment where she can actually drop into that. She's doing everything. She's making all the money. She's spending all her time, trying to support both of them. She's doing all of the wedding planning, and so there's a lot on her plate right now. And it's almost impossible for her to do that. So basically, Lindsay's like, well, why is it that you feel like you can't make a decision without pissing me off? Because Carl feels like, I'm so scared of pissing you off. And he's like, because you make me feel that way. And Lindsay's really smart here. And she's like, no. She's like, I don't make you feel that way. Those are your feelings. And I'm really glad she says this because This is where we talk about energetic sovereignty. Whenever you say to someone, you're making me feel this way, you have given up your power. Now, it's one thing for you to say, like when you do this, I start to feel this way. That's different. That's not accusatory. That's like stating facts. It's saying, okay, when you do this, this is how I start to feel. You're not blaming the other person, but you're just stating and you're opening up the conversation. But right now, Carl is in such victim mode right now. And I'll be honest, I don't like what he's doing here. I'm really now very certain that Carl is trying to gaslight the crap out of Lindsay. And to Lindsay's credit, she is handling this like a rock star. I don't even know if I could handle this, because watching Carl is triggering me from like my past relationships when I was dating an alcoholic for 3 years and living with him. And I know this is like triggering. This is exactly the same dynamic that we went through. And I felt like I was taking crazy pills. And so basically he's making Lindsay feel like she's taking crazy pills, but she's very calmly calling him out on everything and saying no. And she puts it back on him. And so, she's like, no, I don't make you feel that way. Those are your feelings, right? And so Lindsay says to him, well, what do you want from me? What do you need from me? And he's like, I just want you to be pumped up and excited for me because I'm at a crossroads of my career and I want softness. I want tenderness. And it's like, Carl, you're not at a crossroads of your career when you don't have a career. Like you don't have anything right now. And that's like the hard reality of it. And he's putting all of this on Lindsay like it's her fault. And this is a really tough situation. Like he's not owning his own stuff. And I'm sorry, but it's really hard for someone to get really pumped up and excited for you when an entire year has gone by and now you're at like the 11th hour and you're like making potentially very fast and uneducated decisions. Again, because he's not in his masculine energy. When you're in your clear and healthy masculine energy, whether you're a woman or you're a man, you are making very clear, decisive choices. Okay. You have focus. You have a very defined direction of where you're going. And Carl has none of that right now. And so for him to want softness and tenderness, it's like, sorry, you can't be babied anymore, Carl. Like this is not the time to be babied. Like you need a come to Jesus moment. You need someone to actually like sit you down and get real with you, which is what Lindsay's doing. And so Lindsay says, well, I'm doing a lot right now. So she expresses here, like, I've got a lot on my plate. And so then when he's like feeling like she's not understanding him, he goes, well, let me go and put it into a PowerPoint presentation so you can see it all, which for anyone who's watched the show, when she was dating this guy named, I think his name was Stavi or something, he put together a PowerPoint presentation for her on like where their relationship needed to go, the things that he needed to work on, the things she needed to work on. And it was a little much. I do not condone PowerPoint presentations necessarily it totally takes the romanticness out of a relationship, but at the same time, you do need clarity. You do need healthy conversations, and it's okay to write a few points down. A PowerPoint presentation might be a little bit much, but basically he was using this to mock her. And so she's like, so you're mocking me? And he goes, yeah. How does it feel now? Because he's felt like she's mocked him in the past. And, this is just not the right attitude. Like this conversation, Carl has gone into his inner child. His inner child now has taken over this entire conversation. And he is literally speaking from like 8-year-old Carl or something. And Lindsay's just like not understanding like who he is right now. And so she's like, why are you acting like this? Why are you being so mean? And he's like, it goes, well, I guess you're gonna, sometimes, this is me. And so he is trying to bait Lindsay over and over and over again. And it's just not working. She's not taking the bait. And this is where I'm thoroughly impressed with Lindsay. I got to tell you, Lindsay has not been my favorite character on Summer House. I have not, I've understood where she's come from. And there's times where I'm like, no, I see her point, but overall she hasn't been my favorite. But I will say she's clearly gone to therapy and she's taken some notes and she's actually integrating and implementing some of the things that she's learned in her therapy and she's utilizing in her conversations with Carl. But in this moment, whatever Carl has learned has completely gone out the window. And the reason it's gone completely out the window and the reason why these conversations have gone completely south is because Carl is being completely inauthentic with her. Carl is not being true to himself. And so when he's like having these conversations with her, this is where, like, how do I say this? Carl is not listening to himself. He's not listening to his own inner voice, his own inner compass. And because he's so afraid of being a man and making a decision that is uncomfortable and that is going to be a hard thing to have, and because he's so conflict avoidant, he is now putting everything on Lindsay, gaslighting the crap out of her so that she can blow up. And then he can say, see, we're not getting married. He's trying to create a scenario because he doesn't know how to just simply say, this isn't working for me. I'm not ready to get married. I'm not ready to get married with you. We're not at the right place, if at all. Let's be honest. They're not right for each other. But it's because truly Carl's not being authentic to himself. And so therefore he's having very inauthentic conversations with Lindsay. So when Lindsay says to him, are you even sure you want to marry me? Which is a very intuitive moment for Lindsay, very intuitive, whether she realizes it or not. This is where her women's intuition is totally coming into play. And I will say, she can't say that she's completely blindsided where everything was going. Yes, to some degree, she can say I wasn't given all the answer. I wasn't given all the right information. Definitely Carl was withholding very important and valuable information from her that would have helped her understand that he is nowhere close to even wanting to marry her. But at the same time, a lot of red flags are coming up in these conversations. But I think she's just obviously so much desire to want to finally be married, which again is a big thing that a lot of women face. They get caught up in the dream. They get caught up in this idea of I just want to have the fairy tale. I just want to have my moment of being the bride. And now I can be called a wife. And, it's you can't use those fantasies to overlook these very important moments in time that are showing you, hey, red freaking flag, thousands of red freaking flags. It's time to pay attention. So, Carl then just gets annoyed and says, you only hear what you want to hear. And Lindsay makes a really valid point. And she says, well, that's not true. I only hear what I want to hear because I'm asking you questions so I can get better answers. And she's right. She's not only hearing what she wants to hear. She's trying to get Carl to actually give her information that she can work with. He's not giving her anything. He's it's like asking someone who needs to make a very sound financial decision, and all they want to make the sound financial decision on is based on their emotions. It's no, you can't do that. You've got to look at the financial statistics. You've got to look at maybe certain markets. There's a lot of information that you got to look at. You can also bring in maybe your intuition or your emotions to some degree, but you cannot avoid logic here. And Carl's just trying to avoid logic. And she's just trying to say, hey, again, let's go back to the masculine and feminine here. Logic is a very masculine quality. Intuition, emotion, very feminine. Carl's very much in his feminine energy. Lindsay's very much in her masculine energy. Their polarities are just totally off, which is why these two aren't having sex. And I can totally understand why now, because when a woman is in her masculine and a man's in his feminine, their polarities are totally off. They're both turned off from each other. It's even if they do want it, it's they're not coming at it from the right place. And so this is where we now cut out of this conversation. So we cut to the backyard where West and Jesse are now having their beers, and Sierra walks in on them at a pretty funny point in their conversation. And she sits down and she's asking Jesse, so how are you feeling? How are you things going? And, he's oh, well, pretty good, all things considering, but I'm feeling a little scared. And then he goes into joking mode because you can tell Jesse is so uncomfortable with his emotions. He doesn't know what to do. Now, this is where something really interesting happens. And I haven't heard anyone talk about this on any other podcast that like does these recaps. I noticed that when Jesse was opening up here about his emotions and he's actually sharing some of his fears. Now, Sierra, she's a nurse, right? So she's naturally got this inclination to want to comfort and console. And she's got that empathy and the compassion. Because if you're a nurse, you have to have that. Anyone who's in the health industry, healing industry, wellness industry knows, like me being a massage therapist for 15 years before I started doing this, like I had, you need to be compassionate towards people. And so she grabs his hand to hold his hand, which is a very compassionate thing to do. Whenever someone's opening up emotionally, it's always nice to either put your hand on theirs or like maybe you put your arm around them like Wes did for Jesse, the night before. But what production is doing here is they zoom in on Sierra and Jesse's hand, as in, is there some sexual tension here? Do they actually like each other? And really, when it's West and Sierra that are supposed to be liking each other, but clearly West is totally comfortable with this. And it's totally a normal, healthy response of what Sierra's doing. In fact, it's exactly what Jesse needs in this moment, but I don't like what production is doing here in trying to like plant seeds into the audience's mind that, ooh, there might be something sexual going on here, when really this is actually a very healthy form of empathy and compassion. So, this is like he's getting vulnerable. So I don't like this. So then it pans back to Lindsay and Carl, and Carl's packing up his suitcase, and Lindsay's now going into Danielle's room to ask her like, hey, what's going on? What's the plan for today? Are we doing a pool day? Because like Carl looks like he's getting ready to leave. And she's like, yeah, I don't know. It seems what everyone's doing. So I was just going to do that. And then, like, I think Lindsay's like, well, I just want to like hang out. I don't want to go back to the city yet. And she's like, oh, well, you can come with me. She's got her Mini Cooper, and she's like, I've got to take it back to the city anyway, so you can come with me. And so, Lindsay's like, okay, cool. So then it goes back to, now we cut to Paige and Kyle having a conversation in the living room. And this is where, they're talking about Kyle and Amanda's conversation, and Paige is Amanda's best friend. And so she's trying to help Kyle like see Amanda's perspective. And she's like, so what is Amanda saying? Kyle's like just saying, oh, well, she wants to pursue something that makes her happy. And he's like, okay. But I'm like, that's not exactly how the conversation went on the boat the day before. You kind of just took everything personally, and you didn't hear anything she said. You didn't have any moment of support for Amanda. And so in this moment, this is a really interesting conversation. And I am actually going to say some things here that I don't think are very popular in the reality TV sphere audience and what a lot of podcasts say, because everyone is very much Team Amanda. And in this case, I am very supportive of where Amanda is in this situation. And I think that Kyle's being a total dick. Okay. He's being a total dick to her. He's not being a supportive husband. And however, what I think fails to go noticed and talked about at the level that it needs to be talked about is, in this situation, Kyle is a business owner. He is building a massive company like Loverboy, and he's taken on extreme financial risks and investments. Like he's got investors in the company. He's responsible for a lot of people, like employees within the company. And in this year, Loverboy isn't actually doing as well as it was projected to do. And so financially, he's like worried that this business is starting to go in a downstream. Now, the problem is, I don't think Kyle is managing his business at the best of his abilities. He's just taking on too much, where he should be maybe hiring different people to help him manage so that he doesn't have to be so stressed out. And this is a common thing with business owners where, you think like, I've got to do it all. And this is something I've had to go through, where when it came like, what, I can't do anymore, or I can't scale the business. If I want to scale my business, I can't keep doing everything because there's no way. I need other people to help me so I can focus my energies on what I do best, and they can do the things that like really drain me. And I think Kyle is like kind of lacking in that area, but at the same time, he's taken on so much, and I don't think people understand the amount of pressure he's under. And when he sees his wife not working at the same level that he is, and I'm not saying that that's what should happen, but when he sees that, it puts more pressure on him. And he's like, okay, now I've got to work double because Amanda's not showing up in the way that I expect her to show up. And so what I think, people put too much emphasis on what Amanda needs, which again, I want to say, she's completely in the right here. He should absolutely be supporting her in pursuing something that makes her happy, because she has put her life on hold for this guy. She's given up her career in the past. She's put all of her energy into this business, at least at the capacity that she's able to, but she's getting really honest with herself, and she's trying to have honest conversations with Kyle. Like, hey, I'm not happy. I need something for myself. I want to have a little of my own identity. And Kyle's so engrossed in his stress right now because he's literally in survival mode that he can't see that. And so this conversation with Paige starts to really go south because, when he's not failing to really understand what Amanda's needing, this is where Kyle Kyle just gets frustrated, because what happens is Sierra enters the picture. And so when Sierra enters the picture, well, this is where she goes, what are you up in arms about? If Amanda's not going to be quitting Loverboy, like what's the big problem? And of course, this is where things really escalate, because, it really doesn't, Kyle doesn't feel like he's being heard. And this is what I'm going to say. Kyle has always been the goofball. He's been the guy who parties hard, works hard, and, he's the jokester. So when he's having real emotions, people just don't take him seriously. And this is something that often happens where people just don't feel like you need that. It's kind of like if you see someone who's always got it together and they're always like on top of things, and like, you never think to ask them, how are you really feeling? Like, is there something going on deep down below the surface that maybe you need to talk about, you're not sharing with people? Like, this is something that I definitely had to go through. And I'm seeing that in this particular case, I don't feel like he's getting any validation for his emotions, which are very valid and real. The problem is that it's been too Kyle centric in where he's put all his focus. And so now that like it's time for like Amanda's kind of reaching her critical point, it's the timing of it all that's really causing things to kind of escalate and go south. So it's kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. And so, basically Kyle is being selfish in this moment. So when Paige does call him out and starts yelling at him, hey, you're being selfish, this triggers the crap out of him, and understandably so, because even though, yes, he is being selfish because he's not listening to his wife, he's not listening to her needs, he's only focusing on the business, he's not understanding, he does not have good boundaries of how to be the business owner and how to be the husband. He doesn't know how to he's just straddling this line where there's no clear boundary. And because of that, he's really fucking up. But at the same time, he's working so hard because he's trying to make sure that they get to a point in their life where the business can take care of them and provides for their family and can give Amanda what she wants. And so he feels like he's working alone. He feels really alone in the business because Amanda's not really in it, at least in her heart. Now, that doesn't mean that she's not putting in effort and work, but he's expecting her to be showing up in the same way he is, which he can't do. You're the business owner. Like, you're the one who's supposed to work the hardest, to be quite honest. It's your business. And so what I'm seeing here is he just has a complete meltdown. And the girls, of course, they're Amanda's best friends. So they're like going to be supportive of her. And they're just telling him like, you're being so selfish. And so he just goes up to his room and he just has a complete meltdown and he starts crying. And he's like, I can't take it anymore. And so Carl goes up there to like console him. And again, this is where like, Carl again is using this opportunity to vent his issues about Lindsay and trying to like piggyback on like Kyle's situation. It's like, no, Carl, two very different situations. Do not bring your stuff in here right now. You need to use your time to communicate properly and vent, with your fiance and not piggyback off of Kyle's situation. So, anyways, then, okay, so basically it, it's a big shitstorm now. And it cuts to the talking heads, when they're just in their interviews, and Kyle, and this is where Paige is saying, Kyle's always saying Amanda's lazy, she doesn't do anything. And, is so if she's really lazy and she never does anything, which to, Paige's credit, she's right. Like Kyle has said this, like Amanda's lazy. She never does anything. She's always sleeping in. She doesn't want to do what I do. Like, like we have to be friggin' adults. If that's true, then why are you freaking out if she wants to take a little bit of time away from the business? If she's that important, but yet she doesn't do anything, things aren't exactly adding up. And what I think is happening here is that, which we're going to see in a second, is that Amanda clearly brings a lot of support to Kyle in ways that he isn't properly valuing. And we're going to see it when he walks out to the pool. So once, they kind of get outside, Carl kind of talks to him a little bit, and says, I'm really sorry, man. I caught the tail end of that. And, he breaks down and he's like, Carl's like, I just can't articulate what I'm feeling. I just feel really sad. And he goes, everything's just getting reduced down to something that's way more complicated than what it is. And I agree with him. It is being oversimplified, but I think it's being oversimplified because both parties are like exhausted. It's like, okay, we can't keep going around this. Like something has to shift. And so there are a lot of layers here, and it is being oversimplified. But again, Kyle is completely exhausted. He's at his wit's end. He's in total survival mode. His business is not going in the direction financially that he wants it to. And, Amanda's at her breaking point, and her friends are at their breaking point because they can see she's not happy and that she cries to them. And so, unfortunately, it's just the timing of all of this. So, cuts out to the pool, and, Amanda's saying, if he would just act like a husband for a second, which is what she really needs, and that's, again, like I'm saying, I don't think that, Kyle has the awareness that he needs better boundaries. Let's face it, Kyle's emotional maturity is not where it should be, but he has a good heart. You can tell he loves Amanda very much. The problem is he's not acting like that. He's allowing the business to completely take over. So we cut out to the pool where, the girls are there, and Gabby's saying, this is the first year where all of us girls are actually getting along. There's no major divide. And I would say, yeah, like this is actually a really fun summer. I'm loving that all the girls are getting along, aside from Danielle being a little, like I'm not happy with Danielle. I don't really like her this season. I don't like what she's doing. She's very cringe. I just find her behavior, I will say this. I have compassion towards Danielle because she's clearly very hurt and on a much deeper level than she's willing to admit about her past relationship breakup. And from that point, she's been making very cringeworthy decisions. Like it's really hard to watch on TV. I don't know what to say about Danielle. We're not going to go there right now because she's not really playing a big role in this episode. But maybe it'll come up in another episode. And so what happens is Kyle ends up walking out to the pool where all the girls are, and he comes out absolutely defeated, and he's in tears, and he breaks down, and he basically just says, I just feel really bad that in the moment when you and I were having this conversation, Amanda, on the boat, that I couldn't just be like, yeah, let's do that. Like, whatever you need, I got you. And he's like, I feel really bad about that. And so Amanda like gets up because he's crying, and the girls are like, oh, don't cry. And she's like, I've got you. You're okay. You're okay. And she gives him a hug. And in this moment, you can really see how much value Amanda is to him in an emotional support role. And then this is where I don't think that Kyle is really understanding Amanda's value. Like it goes well beyond, like she clearly brings a lot of value to the company in like as a creative director. Her branding is fire. Okay. Like the marketing that she's done, like the way, the things that she's come up with in that company for some of their particular drinks, she's been behind all of that and she's done a really great job there. But her value goes well beyond that. And he's not valuing her from even just the wife duties, which again, it's because they don't have the proper boundaries. It's so hard to have like a husband and wife dynamic and then a business co-business owners dynamic where like he's the business owner, she's the creative director, and she's maybe not stepping up to the job in the way that he expects her to because he's expecting her to work the way a business owner would. And even though she does own part of the business because she's married to him, it's not her thing. It's always been Kyle's thing. Like she wants to do her own thing. She would have never chosen this for herself. And so, what Kyle's failing to realize is that he really cannot sustain this company without her emotional support. And if he's a smart husband, he's going to start like allowing her to take some time away from the company, however much time she needs to start like exploring her desires, her needs, because if her cup is full, she's going to bring that energy into the company and she's going to start operating at a much better level when she is doing her creative director work. And maybe Kyle really needs to think about bringing in another creative director. Like maybe the answer is that, maybe like she's just a consultant in some way and comes in from time to time to consult the creative director. Like there are other ways that he could go about this that would, one, enhance their marriage greatly and could potentially skyrocket their business. But he's stuck. He's so stuck in like his ways. And so, here Amanda like says to him, I think you maybe needed to hear it from other people because whenever you hear it from me, you don't hear it the same way, which is common for a lot of couples, right? Like, I mean, we all know we get so caught up in like our own relationships and there's certain like triggers and we just kind of go in these merry-go-rounds. And so what happens now is everyone's getting ready. Oh gosh, this is where like I'm just floored. Okay, so now we're getting ready to leave the house, right? Everyone's getting ready to leave the house, and Danielle says to Gabby and Lindsay, "Okay, let's go to Dockers." So they're getting ready to go to Dockers, which is they're not going to go home back to the city, and this is what triggers the crap out of Carl again and again. Carl is acting like a complete child in this episode. Like he's just not stepping up like a man in any way, shape, or form. And so then it cuts to Wes and Sierra, and like Wes walks into Sierra's room and he basically like says to her, "Hey, like on Tuesday, I'm taking you horseback riding." And I love these two together. I love Wes and Sierra. Of course, we start to see a little bit of the downside of West. And I'm not going to really lay into West too heavily here because the truth is we all have our stuff, right? No one's perfect and Wes is beyond perfect. But to be quite honest, he's been pretty perfect up until this point. But in this moment, he's like really excited. He wants to surprise her and she loves horses. So she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're just winning major brownie points with me right now." So then it cuts to Lindsay and Carl's bedroom, and Lindsay's now getting ready in the bathroom, and Carl comes to her and he's like, "So you're going to Dockers?" And she's like, "Yeah." And she goes, and this is where like their communication just gets so triggering. Like I would be losing my mind in this situation because I've been here. I have been here with my ex-boyfriend in this situation. And I just, this like really triggered the crap out of me. And I'm just like, "Oh my God, Lindsay, like run." So, okay. So Carl is like, he's like, "Okay, well, we haven't talked about it. So I was just trying to understand what's going on." And I don't understand why they need to talk about it. I don't understand why it's such a big deal for him to like just drive back to the city alone. Like they live together. He doesn't work. He's always home. Like they're spending the weekends together. It's good to have a little space. It's good to be alone a little time. It's good for her to go out with her girlfriends and have a little girl time, And so in this situation, Lindsay's just explaining to him that she needs to decompress and chill and she needs time and space away from Carl, which I can totally understand because why? Carl has done nothing but gaslight the crap out of her all weekend. This girl has been dodging gaslit bullets like left, right, and center. And so, yeah, she's exhausted. If I were her, the last thing I'd want to do is get into a small compartmentalized vehicle with Carl and then potentially be gaslit for 3 hours longer on the way to the city. Like, there's just no way. I completely understand why she's like, "I just want my space." Like, he's completely exhausted the crap out of her emotionally. And again, to Lindsay's credit, she has done an amazing job here of dodging every bait that Carl has put out, every trap that he has set out on her to get her to blow up, get her to lose her mind, because we all know Lindsay can get activated, and he's trying to activate Lindsay in this moment, and he's failing miserably, which I think is getting him even more triggered in this moment. And so here, he's like, okay, then I'll just drive back to the city by myself. That's fine. That's fine. Okay, that's fine. And it's like, no, Carl, it's not fine. It's not fine. It's like, if we all know, as a woman, we all know when we go into our wounded feminine, we say, okay, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And every man on this planet knows when his woman says, it's fine, it's not fine. It's not fine. And that's what Carl is doing right now. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. But he's trying to do it in this like really anger repressed kind of way. And Lindsay calls him out on it. I'm so like really impressed that she does this. Like, this is a really good teachable moment here for all of us. And she's like, you're trying to guilt me. I don't think it's fair that you're trying to make me feel guilty because I need to have some decompression time, which I will say, on top of the fact that Carl has completely exhausted her all weekend from his tactics of trying to bait her emotionally into blowing up and her dodging every bomb and minefield that he's tried to get her to step on in this entire weekend. On top of that, she's freaking the breadwinner of their relationship. She's the one who's putting in all the hours in the week working while he's just trying to figure his life out. And, he's been doing that for like a year. And so she's also planning a wedding. Yeah. Let the girl go have some decompression time. You want softness and tenderness, Carl? Go let her have some time away from you so she can finally get soft and tender. Like, I don't understand. Like, this is really, really crazy. And so Carl's like, well, you didn't consider me when you were thinking about this. And I'm like, why does she need to consider you? Like the amount of like, oh my God, the baby child kind of maturity level of emotions that Carl is displaying here is so difficult to watch. It's like, oh, Carl, like, this is not a good look for you. Like, totally, you have been in the right when she was doing her stuff with the whole like alcohol issues at the beginning of the season. But this, what is unfortunately, and this really isn't about like who's going to be more right, who's going to be more wrong. It really isn't about that. But Carl is really just unraveling any kind of support that he had from the audience at this point. And so, he's like, well, you didn't like take my consideration. And, he goes on and saying, we drive back to the city together every single week. And, he feels like, he goes, I feel like we're missing each other. And it's like, yeah, you are missing each other, Carl, because you're being inauthentic with Lindsay at every turn of your conversation. You're not being honest with her. You're trying to get her to step on every landmine that you've planted for her emotionally, and she's dodging it like a freaking ninja. She's dodging every landmine like a ninja. And so, yeah, what you're actually missing is baiting her into a total activation. And that's what he's really saying here. But anyways, I digress. So, all he's doing is skirting around the conversation and going in these merry-go-rounds. So Lindsay's like, no, she goes, we're going to Dockers. And she goes, I think I need space. And he's like, oh, I don't think we need space like that. And I'm just like, what the hell, Carl? Like, just take a couple hours, like, you do need space. You need some time to really consider like what your plan of action is here, because you're failing miserably. It may be time to abort mission and think about owning up and becoming a man in this situation, which, sadly he does way too late. And so I gotta say, I am very curious to see how he handles it. Knowing how he's handling this situation, I'm very curious to see how he actually ends the engagement on cameras with Lindsay. Because if he's handling it this way, I would bet money on it that whatever way it's going down, it's not going to be this really simple, like, hey, I don't feel comfortable getting married. I'm not in the place. I don't think we're in the right place. Like I don't think it's going to be a very mature breakup. Let's just put it that way. Okay. So then what happens is, now it becomes a luggage issue. And so Lindsay's like, okay, well, you're going to take my luggage. And he's like, oh, now you want me to take your luggage for you? And I'm just like, oh my God. Like, honestly, this episode was just a therapist or a life coach's nightmare watching. Like, anyone who's done their healing journey, anyone who knows the difference between the masculine and the feminine energy and how the polarities can get so fucked up in situations like this. And literally, like, this is like watching it all in real time. And so I'm just like, dude, for once, just be the man in this situation and take her luggage home. It's the least you could do. You could actually step up to the plate and take her luggage home in your car so that she can start being soft and tender, Carl. But no, he's like, oh no, like he's just throwing a tantrum now. So so what ends up happening is he quickly, really quickly, if you didn't notice, starts getting his luggage all the way downstairs, gets into his car, and drives off as fast as he could so Lindsay doesn't have a chance to get downstairs and put her luggage in the car. So Lindsay starts. So then we cut to Lindsay coming down the stairs, and West is at the bottom of the stairs. He's like, oh, babe. He goes, don't bring that down yourself. I'll grab that for you. And it's like, Carl, teachable moment. This should have been you. This should have been you taking your luggage down for your fiance. There's a moment here where you can actually be the man, let her go into her feminine. You take the heavy load. You go put it into the car. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of an ask. But this is where a moment where, you know what? You're not making her take care of herself. And of course, we see West step up and be the man, and, he takes her luggage down. So, of course, she gets outside with Danielle and she's like, where's Carl? And Lindsay and Danielle are like, oh my God, he left. That's crazy. And still in this moment, Lindsay is still not getting activated. She's like, this is just crazy. I don't know what to do. And so, okay, now everyone's gone home. We cut into the city and now it's Tuesday when, Jesse is now got his doctor's appointment that he's been really worried about. And he's having coffee with his mom, Cheryl, in the city. And they're just kind of talking about how went 5 years ago when it really came up that he realized he had this testicular cancer and he didn't know, he didn't want to scare his parents. And he had told his dad, and then his dad, realized we got to tell mom, and just the family. This was really heartbreaking. I got really emotional watching this because, I've had cancer scares. My mom had a brain tumor, and the whole family just takes on all of this energy. And it's one thing when your parent is going through it, but if you're a parent and your child's going through it, like that's a completely different issue. And my heart breaks for them. And you can see like Jesse's like trying to hold it together. And then, his mom, Cheryl's like, I haven't been in a hospital in 5 years since then because it was so hard on me. And I don't know what I'm going to do when I'm going to go back in, which, I don't know if that's the best thing to say to Jesse in this moment, but of course you give grace and compassion. Everyone's scared. And so, they're just like, well, we got to do what we got to do. And so they go in, and then it cuts to West and Sierra finally going on their horseback riding date. And so, they are so cute together. I like really hope that they can get together and they can both get over their issues because they're super fun to watch. Like I just adore these two. And so, Wes takes Sierra horseback riding. Now, this is a really beautiful gesture on his part, but listen, if you're going to like take Sierra out and impress her with like a horseback riding date, knowing that she loves that so much and that she loves being around animals. And she says later, like, I just feel like I'm in my natural habitat. Like, if you're just wanting to be in a situationship, like that's not the kind of date you take someone on, right? Like, you guys let me know in the audience, but like, I'm just like, this is where West is starting to lose me a little bit because I love that he's making this gesture. I love that he's being so thoughtful, but he's also emotionally not on the same page as his gestures. And so after their horseback riding, they're standing around this fenced off arena and they're watching the horses and they're having finally a conversation that they should have been having weeks ago because we're now like well into the summer. And so, this is where they start saying, like, what are your intentions? Because Sierra's like, oh, Wes basically brings up that, he's like, oh, maybe you could come to Thanksgiving. I could see you coming and having Thanksgiving dinner with me. And you can see her. She's like, I don't know. And he's like, or Halloween, and she's like, well, what are your intentions? Like, what are your objectives here? And I gotta say, I wasn't as supportive on Sierra because I felt like, girl, you got to let your guard down a little bit with this guy. Like, it's very clear he likes you, which it is. It's very clear he likes her a lot. And, she's taking it slow. They haven't had any sex at all, which I think has been really smart on her part, especially given the conversation that we all get to witness in this moment, because she knows, and I'm the same way, that if you have sex with someone that you like, you get emotionally attached really quickly. And her fear is that she's going to get emotionally attached faster than he is. And then she's going to be stuck liking him more than he likes her. Now she's going to find herself in a similar situation that she found herself in with Austin. Now, West is very different than Austin in many ways, but I don't blame her, right? The problem here now is that West is not giving her anything concrete to make her feel safe. And West is clearly not, this is where I'm like, West, dude, you were doing so well. This is where you're going to lose some of the audience as well. But it's fine because he's human and I'm not really going to rag on him that much because I really do like him. I think he's great. But basically, she's like, Sarah doesn't want to be in a situationship for like a year. So she needs to know, like, what are his things? And when he's like, she goes to him, she goes, well, are you talking to other girls? Or I don't even know, she's, are you dating other girls? But his answer is like, bruh, like, whoa. But it's good. Like, I'm glad she called him out on that. Like, if he's not willing to get clear on the details, go girl, you ask him for those details. And so, he's kind of skirting around. He's like, no, I'm not like dating anyone. He goes, but I haven't really cut off my communication with anyone. I wouldn't do that if we're not exclusive yet. And he's like, well, I'm not going to be exclusive with someone I'm not having sex with. And she's like, well, the problem is that she's not going to be having sex with you until she knows that you're exclusive with her and that she's got some clear objectives. Like, she knows where your intentions are. And Wes is just really scared of the commitment. He's actually scared of being alone, but he's also scared of the commitment. And so he has this idea that, being involved in a relationship means he's losing his freedom. And this is something that I've noticed within the dating culture over the last, I would say, 4 to 5 years, is that people don't know how to date anymore. They look at dating as soon as you're in a relationship, you're pretty much married. And it's not like, okay, we're getting into a relationship so we can explore the relationship between us. We can explore if we're compatible. We can explore if we can grow together, and everyone's just scared to catch feelings. Everyone's just scared. Like, no. It's like, I need to know if this is it. And if I'm saying yes to you, like, that's it. And it's like, how can anyone make a decision of that much clarity without having more information? And so that's why I think we've evolved into the realm of situationships now as opposed to relationships. But in this moment, he says to her, like, I'm not ready to get into a relationship like tomorrow. And he's like, but I don't think you are either. And she's like, no. She goes, but I'm not willing to be in a situationship for another year. And so he's like, well, I just want to, also get my shit figured out. And she's like, okay, what does that mean? Like, how long is that going to take? He's like, well, I don't know. It's not going to be like, I don't know if he said months or years, but he was too vague. He didn't have clarity here. And I'll be honest, West, you're using that as an excuse to buy yourself some time because you're still not knowing how to navigate your fear of commitment. And so he's totally using that as an excuse because I don't know why you need to have your shit together in order to be in a relationship. She's like, she clearly likes you. You can spend time together. You got your job now. Like, I don't understand what that really means. And so he's totally using that as an excuse. And I think Sierra's totally sniffing him out on that. And she's like, well, that doesn't work for me. Like, she goes, that, like, I don't like that. And he's like, no. And you can tell, like, that gives her the ick. And honestly, it would give me the ick too, because, for a woman to be able to surrender and say, okay, like I trust where you're leading me, you've got to have clarity on where you're leading her. And he doesn't have clarity on where he's leading her. And this is something like, for me too, when I'm dating, like if I don't feel like I can trust the guy to lead me and make make a lot of the decisions, then I can't trust him. And that means I can't go into my feminine energy and I can't surrender and be nurturing and loving and all the things that I want to do, and get that emotional attachment because like the guy's not making it safe. And so I kind of get this. So she makes a valid point here. She goes, okay, well, if that's the case, then she goes, then I don't think we need to pause all these conversations of me going to Thanksgiving or Halloween. Like we shouldn't be having conversations where I'm hanging out with your family. And valid point, Sierra. I'm so glad she did this. This was so important because what I think is a lot of guys don't realize that, when a woman hears you making plans with your family for her to be involved in your family, like that's relationship stuff. Like that's commitment. Like that's you're seeing future. And he's more in love with the idea of how that feels right now, but not with like understanding the consequences of how that's going to make Sierra feel, And so, yeah, it makes him feel warm and fuzzy. And he knows that she's going to love that idea. But down the road, if you're not committed to that, then why are you even offering that as an opportunity for you two to explore together? So I'm really glad that she called him out and she's like, well, let's pause on that. Smart move on Sierra's part. So this is kind of where we end the conversation with Summer House, and really interested to see where this is all taking us next week, especially with what's unraveling between Lindsay and Carl. Okay. So let me know your thoughts on what you thought of the Summer House episode and what you've been thinking about my take on it all. But let's go into the Valley. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a faster recap because, to be quite honest, I don't find like I actually like the show The Valley. I think they're doing a really good job, but I found this episode nowhere near as exciting, at least from a perspective of like, ooh, this is a really teachable moment. This is a really teachable moment. But there are some fun things in here. So in the Valley, which is a spinoff of Vanderpump Rules, like of Kristen and Jax used to be on Vanderpump Rules, and kind of looking at how they evolved. And now like some people are parents, they're married, they have kids, they all live in the Valley in California. And so we start this episode off where it ended last week, which is at Kristen's launch party for a t-shirt, like she's doing some revival or rebranding or something. And in this moment, Zach, one of her good friend and Brittany's best friend, is finding out that he is not invited to Janet's baby moon. And it's likely because of his friendship with Kristen, because Kristen and her boyfriend, Luke, is not invited either. And it's because Kristen's been causing a lot of drama, and all this stuff. And she's just been like spilling the beans on certain things. And Kristen's one of those people, like, you want to love her, you want to root for her, but she kind of like, she gets in her own way. She's her own worst enemy in many ways. But, yeah. But, at the same time, like, the show wouldn't be the show without Kristen on it. So, like, she does play her role pretty well. So anyway, we have Zach, and he's actually emotional. He's in tears over this. And so, he gets upset, and he's just like, I don't understand. Why am I not invited? He goes, I understand why you're not invited, Kristen. He goes, but what have I done to her? Janet and I are in a really good place, And, so Kristen's like looking at Jax. He's like, why are you the one telling us? He's like, well, I'm just telling you because, you didn't invite Janet to your event. So like, I'm telling you. And she's like, well, like Kristen goes on, she's like, I don't know what she's like saying exactly, but then like all of a sudden Jack's like, well, I don't want to get involved. I don't want to, this isn't right. I shouldn't be fighting other people's battles. And it's like, Jax, you love to start the battle and then just drop out after you've dropped the bomb and let the whole mess be dealt with by other people. But anyways, so we cut to Brittany, Jasmine, and Zach talking and like really trying to understand what's going on. And Zach's just emotional. He's losing it. But in the background, you can see this other guy. His name is Simon. He happens to be one of Janet's friends, one of her gay friends. And he's totally eavesdropping, and he's on his phone texting Janet everything that's going on. And so Jasmine calls him out, right? And she's like, what are you doing? She goes, do you mind? This is like not a conversation for you to be had. And so Janet is so messy. She's so messy. And I got to tell you, I don't understand why people liked Janet from the beginning. I've never liked Janet from the beginning. The way the whole season, this whole show opened up at the very beginning with Janet and her husband, Jason, is it? Her behavior and demeanor towards him, it was so grinding for me. Like, I just was like, oh my gosh, she's one of those women who just like bosses her husband around and tells him to do this and tells him to do that. And basically like he just takes it and just does all this stuff because he's a nice guy. And, it doesn't look like he really stands up for himself like in the way that he should. And so I immediately was like, oh, I don't like her energy. I don't like her energy. She's not a nice person. And from all the podcasts that I love, everyone loves her. And I'm like, I don't get it. Like, why? How does no one see this? And well, now everyone's starting to see it. And so she's like basically getting her friend to give her the play-by-play on everything that's going on there. So anyways, this scene cuts out now to Jesse and Michelle's house. And this is where these two are married, but their marriage is completely on the rocks. And we already know that they have filed for divorce, right? So, once the season is over, they've already filed for divorce. So we know this marriage is going nowhere. It's on the rocks, and it's completely obvious how like there's nothing left here. And Michelle is just kind of buying her time, it seems like. And Jesse is trying to put in the effort. Now, I don't know if he's putting in the effort for like just to save face for him and for the show's sake. I think it's a little bit of that. And I think there's a part of him that really values family, but at the same time, he's a pretty big dick of a husband. Like he's just, he's gross in just his whole demeanor. And so anyways, he has gone on a way to do an ayahuasca and mushroom plant medicine journey in the desert somewhere. And he's now returning from his one night experience in the desert. And he comes up to share his experience with Michelle on their, like some kind of outdoor little patio. And they're sitting out there, and you can tell Jesse is so calm that he's still under the influence of the ayahuasca and the mushrooms. And I say that because I know I was exactly the same way on my first ayahuasca journey. When I came back, I was just so chill. You guys probably, if you watch my YouTube videos from, a couple years ago, when I actually videoed play by play, like of some of the moments just hours after the ceremony had ended. And you're in a really vulnerable place. You're in a really emotional and really calm, like you're just like, wow, because it is very transformative. And so he's kind of going through that, and he comes up and he wants to share his experience with her. And Michelle is saying oh, you're kind of freaking me out. I've never seen you this calm before. And so, he admits in his kind of interview here, he's like, usually whenever I'm dealing with a life coach or a therapist, he goes, I always go in thinking, how can I manipulate this? He goes, but in this ayahuasca journey, he goes, I really just let go and I just went with it. And he goes, and I don't ever do that's not my personality. And to be fair, I want to say that is the only way you can go into a plant medicine journey. So because he actually reached that place, I have to say, I do actually err more on the side of he really was trying to find a solution here. He's like, let me see something I'm not seeing so I can help my marriage. And that's why I tend to err a little bit more on that side than him just trying to play this up for the cameras, because it's really hard to let go in a plant medicine journey, to fully surrender. Not everyone can. But clearly he was able to. And so he starts to share his journey, and production, of course, is making fun of him by adding in all these kind of psychedelic kind of lighting, layovers into him, and, causing it to be pixelated, as he says, he saw these pixelations. And so he he explains like it was really intense and it came on really hardcore. And he goes, and everyone turned into energy. And outside the grass, like the grass got like turned into energy. Everything outside of him turned into energy. And then he got rid of some like burning in his head, which I'm not really sure what that was. But then he says he saw these demons and he kept trying to throw the demon away. And that everybody was so pixelated. And then he died and he believes that, he had an ego death. And so, he's basically production's making fun of him in this moment, which I'm not a fan of. But at the same time, we're talking about a guy who's really in need of this journey. Like he really is. Like he's so in his ego all the time. He's usually a total dick. And it's nice to kind of for a moment see a side of him that isn't this. Unfortunately, production's kind of making fun of him here, and making fun of anyone who does these journeys as if they're like pointless. Now, he was going on this journey hoping that it would completely transform him. Yes, when people go on these ayahuasca, specifically ayahuasca journeys, sometimes, yes, even mushroom journeys, people can have a very life transforming experience where your mind gets rewired. I know of people who were like able to quit smoking on a dime. They stopped drugs, like, and altogether never like pick them up again. Like there is that possibility, but it's really an independent journey and it's never going to be the same. It's depending on where you're at and how willing you are to surrender to these things. And so obviously most people shouldn't expect to have their entire life transformed in one night. I think that is absolutely unrealistic, but it is possible. I would say that I do feel like something definitely shifted within Jesse, and we're going to see it kind of playing out a little later on in the show. But, what's really unfortunate here is that, his wife, Michelle, is yawning while he's sharing his experience. So you can tell she's not that interested. She's pretty bored. She's completely checked out of this marriage. And, then Jesse realizes also from his journey that he's like, oh, I just realized like, Jesse, you're enough as you are. So clearly he overcompensates with his egotistical stuff, like trying to be bigger than what he is, because deep down, he doesn't feel enough. And this is very common. A lot of people will come across as, really, he comes across as a pompous asshole in a lot of ways, but that really does, what we're learning here in this moment is it's very common for it to stem from insecurity, which he clearly doesn't feel like he's enough. But in his journey, he was shown like, no, you are enough. And so, Michelle is asking him how he feels and if he feels any different, because does he feel like he's a changed person? And Jesse's like, yeah, I feel completely different. I feel like I'm a completely different person. And this is crazy because before they left, he's like, well, what do you want from this experience? Like, what do you want from me when I come back? And she's like, I want you to be a different personality. And I'm like, oh my God, like you want your husband to have a completely different personality? Like, if this just doesn't scream like you two are not supposed to be together, like she's so like, that is such a mean thing to say. And granted, he's not nice to her as well, but it's just showing how toxic this marriage is. And so, she's like, yeah, I wanted him to have a different personality and he came back a different person. So I'm happy about that. And I'm like, oh my God, like, could you just hear yourself for a second saying that? Like, that's so crazy. Like, just to have some self-awareness of being like, wow, I'm actually saying that. Like, maybe I really shouldn't be married to this person. And maybe it's time to really get honest with my husband. And we should really talk about this and not skirt around it and delay it, which clearly I think they're just delaying this for the sake of the show. And, so, Jesse claims that, he felt like he was blind and now he can see. And Michelle agrees with that statement. And she's like, that's exactly how you felt. It felt like you have not seen things, like you've been totally blind. And so I think this is really good that you can see. And so in this moment, this is where it gets really cringeworthy. And this is like, oh God, it's so cringy as if you were to watch this, where like Jesse just wants to like connect with her and like kind of closes his eyes and goes to like lean forward to kiss her. And she's just like leaning away and pulling away. And I mean, like, I think we've all been there, where the person that we're with is feeling something that we're not. And like, we don't know what to do. And so clearly she's emotionally, physically, sexually checked out of this marriage. And he's trying everything. Like, of course, he's just had this experience with feeling very connected to everything. And so he's feeling very connected and wants to share that connection with his wife, and she's not having it. So they like kiss and they hug, and it's so cringeworthy. You can tell like she just can't wait to be out of his arms. So then it cuts to Janet's house, and Janet's now here. She's getting ready to pack for her baby moon, and one of her gay friends is over there. Another one of her the guy Simon comes over, and so they're they're there, and they're just very typical gay personalities here, and the way that they were just acting was so hilarious to watch. I It was hilarious to watch. I can't say I'm a fan of them, but they were really funny to watch. And so basically she's like, yeah, Simon's kind of filling her in on like what he witnessed. And he's like, Kristen was crying, Zach was crying. She's like, oh my God. She's like, what? And so, she's like, well, I feel like should probably call Zach because, I don't want him to be emotional. And so she calls Zach and they have a conversation on the phone, and, instantly like Zach goes in on her, and rightfully so. He's upset. He's really emotional, and he has a right to be, because right now Janet's kind of acting like, she's trying to like kick Kristen out of the group, where like Kristen's likely the one who got her on the show in the first place. Kristen is like one of the stars. Like she is the star of the show, or both her and Jax, which I can't say I'm huge fans of these two, but they definitely create good TV. Like, that's good for entertainment purposes. And it's also great for being like, yeah, I feel a lot better about where I'm at in my life and that I don't have friends like you in my life. It's great for that. But basically, Janet calls Zach and they have this conversation, and Zach just like lays into her. And again, I think he's justified in doing this, and she's acting like he's completely off base for this. And she just goes in and saying, this is not the way you should be talking to me if you're wanting an invitation to my baby moon. I expected you, like, you're acting very entitled. And he's just like, I thought we were better than this. I thought we were better than this. And she's like, I thought we were in a good place and I was willing to give you chances. And it's just like the way she's talking to him is so condescending that I'm like, Zach, you do not want Janet as a friend. Like, just like, this is not a friendship you want to have, because she's just acting like she's queen bee, and like, this is your baby moon. And I'm sorry, but baby moons are meant to just be with you and your husband, right? So like, it's clearly like a friend trip. And she's like, it's not a friend trip, it's my baby moon. But I'm like, all your friends are coming. And we later find out that, Jasmine came alone. And so why couldn't Zach come alone? So anyway, as like her and Zach are fighting on the phone, her two gay friends are like, hang up on him. And they were just like, the facial expressions on those two were just hilarious to watch. And so she goes and says, oh, like, my battery's at 1%. And she goes, I don't want to like make it seem like I'm hanging up on you. Meanwhile, the girl's battery's not at 1%. And so Zach's like, well, this is feeling like really awkward that we're ending on this note. And then he hangs up on her instead. So, she just acts like, what the hell just happened? What did I do? Like, she's just so out to lunch and so unaware of herself, like so lacking so much self-awareness at this point. So then we cut to Kristen and Luke's apartment, and she's just going on complaining on how it's like, well, she's going on like, you didn't invite me to this and they didn't invite me. And she's just basically complaining how she wasn't invited. And, you can tell Luke's getting a little irritated. He's like, listen, we got to figure out if we're moving on from this or not. He's like, what direction are we going to go? Because we're either going to need to put into it, like, or we're going to have to, like, we're going to move forward or we're going to move away. So then we cut to everyone getting ready to go up to Big Bear. And the place that they're going to looks really fabulous. I know I'd love to spend a weekend there. And so they're all going up in their cars. Janet and Jason are already up at the property. And the property looks amazing, and you can see Janet and Jason are in the kitchen, or they're somewhere on the property. And she's like, yeah, she goes, I'm just excited to get away from all the bullshit, which means, Kristen, Zach, and Luke by proxy. And it's just like, oh gosh, girl. It's like, you are part of this. You have probably been the main starter of a lot of this stuff, but somehow she's managed to like skirt and fly under the radar of everyone else. And everyone's just like honing in on Kristen and Zach. And so then it cuts back to the cars with Brittany, and she's getting car sick. And I don't understand why no one's like, are you pregnant? Like, hello, which we all know that she just gave birth. And so clearly what's happening here is I'm almost 100% positive that she's actually pregnant, but she's not realizing it. And it's probably because I don't think her and Jax are really having sex at all, which we also find out in a few minutes in this episode. But they must have had sex at some point, because she's car sick. She's throwing up all the time. At Janet's hibachi dinner on the last episode, she couldn't stay. And so, she's not feeling well. And so I'm pretty sure she's pregnant already. Then, it cuts into the car, where it's now we're in the car with Brittany and Jax, Michelle and Jesse, and Jasmine's in this car. And, and Jesse, and this is where, Jasmine's saying to Jesse, hey, I can't wait to hear about your trip. That must have been so amazing. I don't want to hear about it yet. She goes, but I'm really looking forward to hearing about it from you. And Michelle pipes in, Jesse's wife, oh yeah, we've already had a fight, and so Jesse's like, we didn't have a fight. We were just talking about like lingerie and you wearing lingerie and like fantasy night, which fantasy night was not about lingerie. It was about like literal fantasy, like hobbits and fairies and, Lord of the Rings kind of stuff, which I think they're going to be doing at their weekend in Big Bear. We'll find out exactly. But, what's happening here, though, I want to point out here is that Michelle is constantly like any opportunity she can dig to like bring him down a notch. She's doing anything to make fun of him. And this is really emasculating to Jesse, And so again, I'm not saying either is in a good place. These two are both terrible. But what I'm just pointing out is that when the woman is doing this, she's constantly emasculating her man. And, if you're doing this over and over and over again, digs like this eventually accumulate and really wear down someone's self-esteem, someone's sense of self-worth, which we can already see from his ayahuasca journey. That was something that he had to face. And so then, he goes on to say, God, I just want to have sex. Like, I haven't had sex in so long. And then Brittany pipes in and she's like, yeah, well, I haven't had sex either. She goes, so I don't know what that's like either. And then Jax is like, oh, poor Jasmine having to sit in the car and listen to all of this. And this is where like, she kind of pipes in and says, oh, I'm sure that the moon is in retrograde. And I'm like, the moon is in retrograde? The moon doesn't go in retrograde. The planets can go in retrograde, but the moon doesn't go in retrograde. So this is actually really funny where they're now talking a little bit about astrology as if they understand what's going on. And then Michelle pipes in and she goes, yeah, this is the time where people are supposed to fight. And I'm like, no, that's when the moon is full. The moon isn't in Mercury retrograde, but people can fight during a Mercury retrograde. And that's just because there's miscommunications. It doesn't mean you're supposed to fight. So I think there's just a little bit of misunderstanding of what's going on. But you know what? We're talking astrology on mainstream media. So I'm like, we're going to get there somehow. Right. So then everyone finally gets up to Big Bear Cabin and they're all unpacking and they're saying hello and they're all unpacking things. And this is where I am like, oh my gosh, Jesse just had a major, like, I don't know, a gifted moment, let's just call it, because he brings the suitcase, puts it on the kitchen counter, unpacks it, and it's like a champagne case or a champagne suitcase. It's basically filled with all like high-end alcohols, margarita mix, Bloody Mary mix, coffee maker, like a coffee espresso maker, really good coffee. And he's basically saying, when someone tells you, don't worry, the house is going to be stocked with alcohol and groceries, like, no, your definition of alcohol and my definition of Bordeaux are two different things. And I'm totally on the same line as Jesse here because I'm like, that's genius. That's genius. Like, I never thought of packing. Like, there's certain things that you just don't want to skimp on. And for me, if I'm going to have coffee, it's certainly not going to be that. And if I'm going to have some champagne, yeah, make it the good kind. So he's just making sure that he's getting his good quality stuff, which I'm not going to fault him for. I think it's genius. So then, and I'm totally going to do that on my next trip. So, so then everyone's like going to their rooms or finding their rooms, and Jesse and Michelle go into their room and it has two big beds in it. And Michelle's like, oh, great. You sleep in that that bed and I'm going to sleep in this bed. He's like, no, we're totally having sex this weekend. And she's like, no, we're not. And it's just like, oh, it's like these two couldn't be on opposite pages, more opposite pages. Like Jesse's just like not reading the room and Michelle's just like, oh, get off of me. And so it's so hard to watch. And so then they're all outside on the deck and they've got shots of tequila and they're all cheersing to the baby moon and they're all getting ready. And like, they're saying, okay, the girls are going to go on a pontoon boat ride. The guys are going to go down to the beach on the lake. And then eventually they're all going to meet up. And in this part, Jax like interrupts everyone. And then Janet says, hold on. She says, we are not talking about anything to do with Kristen this weekend. Okay. We're not talking about anything. We don't want any drama here. We're all going to have a good time. So if anyone mentions Kristen's name, they have to put $20 into a jar. And the person who avoids saying Kristen's name all weekend the most is going to take all the money home. And this is really funny because she's the first person who brings up Kristen on the pontoon. And it's just like, Janet, like, you're the one who's the shit stirrer. You're the one who like asks people questions. So they have to bring her up. Like, it's so crazy. Like she's so messy. She's so messy. So anyways, everyone goes to, their places. So the girls are now on the pontoon boat and, and Janet claims that she's never been to Big Bear before. And she's like so excited to be there. And they talk about how she's like, I went to a coffee shop and they're like, is whole milk okay? And she's like, oh my God, yes, whole milk. And I have to say, I totally relate to this because I'm like, I don't want your oat milk crap. I don't want your rice milk. I don't want your soy milk. Like, give me the real thing. Give me the creamy whole milk, all the fat. Yes. And what people don't realize is that the fattier the milk, the slower the release of caffeine in your bloodstream. Not that I really drink that much coffee anymore, but I can totally relate. I was like, I get this. I get where you're going with this. And so it also then cuts to the scene where the guys are like blowing up their inflatables. And, Jax is having heart. He's like, I can't find the hole. Like, where's the hole? And then Jesse's like, if you can't find the second hole, dude, you're never going to have a second kid. And so, they're just like kind of getting ready. And then, of course, I'm back to the pontoon boat. Like I said, this is where Janet brings up Kristen to Jasmine. And she's like, I just wanted to kind of talk to you about like my conversation and what happened. And I talked to Zach and just letting you know. And, and Jasmine has Zach's back on this. And, and so like, while like, Janet is trying to explain herself, Jasmine's not letting her get away with it. Cause like Jasmine knows like, Janet, you've been like skating under the radar here. And so basically, a little bit of Janet's true colors emerge. She's like, she goes, you let me speak. And Jasmine realized, whoa, you're not going to use that tone with me. And so it was a little bit of a steamrolling. And so basically, they're kind of talking about the way Simon was standing there and Jasmine kind of enacts it out. And she's like, it was kind of creepy. And Janet's like, well, I just wanted to be nosy. And she, I'm nosy. And cause she goes, cause that, he told me that everyone was crying and like, oh shit, that wasn't my intention. And it's like, come on, if you're going to exclude someone from a group outing, like that's just mean girl crap. Like that's just stupid. And I'm sorry, but when you're having a reality show, and especially if it's the first season, no one should be excluded from these trips. Like you have to have all the cast here for the whole entertainment of the show to work. Like this is about putting everyone's life on blast. You don't get to pick and choose. And right now, Janet's kind of acting like she's the star of the show. And it's just, you can, it's very clear to me to see what her intentions are here. I don't like her. I'm not a fan of Janet at all. And she's starting to reveal her true colors here. So now the guys are at the beach and they're all chatting. And then Jesse just throws a bottle of alcohol, an empty bottle of alcohol on the beach, which we later find out he drank an entire bottle of tequila by himself, which isn't so great to do after you've just had an ayahuasca and mushroom journey. Like you probably should be abstaining from alcohol for a little bit because that medicine is still in your body. It's still active. And so there's going to be like, on top of the fact that that's just a lot of alcohol to drink for one person, but it's also saying like, the ayahuasca brought up stuff for him that clearly he needs to deal with. And it's kind of bringing it all to the surface and he doesn't know what to do with it. And so he actually goes into inflatable and he's going off by himself. Like he's kind of going into a place where he's isolating himself. He doesn't know what to do. He's probably feeling all these emotions. And so this is where Jax is like starts bringing up the fact that, he knows that Michelle has been sending text messages to another guy, and, Kristen's bringing this up, and, he's telling Danny and Jason about this. And Jason, who's like the actual adult in the group, is like saying like, why are we acting like bitches? Why don't we just tell our friend what's going on? Like, why do we keep perpetuating the rumors and like telling everyone else but the person that we need to tell them about? Like, if these rumors are being spread about our friend, like he should know about it. He should know that maybe his wife might be texting, men, and all that kind of stuff, or that at least people are having conversations about it. And so, and I'm just like, Jason, have you seen the people you're hanging out with? Have you seen your wife who you're married to? Like, and he, in one of the episodes, I think it was the last episode, he finally actually admitted, like, yeah, my wife's kind of causing a lot of the drama. Like, she used to be a lawyer. Now she's like a stay-at-home gossiper. And the problem here is I think that Jason is too nice of a guy. He's not fully, in his masculine energy, but he's a lot more mature than everyone else here in this group. But he's not fully in his masculine energy, and he's allowing his wife to just get away with stuff. And I don't think he's standing up to her in the ways that he should. And I'll be honest, if their marriage continues in the same dynamic of polarities that it is, because we already discussed this on Summer House, their marriage won't last, or at least it won't be happy. So something has to shift there in their dynamic, because I can already see the writing on the wall there. And so it cuts to Kristen's apartment now, and her and Luke are meeting with a therapist, or like I think a couples counselor that Danny and Nia had met with before they got married. And they're suggesting like, if you guys are wanting to have a kid, maybe you should like talk to a couples counselor so you guys get on the same page and you start asking the hard questions, because Kristen doesn't want to talk about the hard questions and Luke wants to ask all the hard questions. So we know that Luke lives in Colorado and he's here for the summer, spending it with her in LA. But like, Kristen's so hell-bent on getting pregnant and having a kid with him, but at the same time, they're not decided on where they want to live, and they're not on the same page about all of the things that are so important to talk about when you're having a kid. So they have this like counselor come over, and he starts asking them the hard questions, like, okay, have you talked about finances? Where are your families? Do you not have the right support system? And it becomes very glaringly obvious in this moment to Kristen, like, oh wow, like, I need a support system. And the counselor is like, well, what you have to realize, and a lot of people don't realize, is that when you have a baby for the first time, your entire life is mostly taking care of a human being that doesn't know how to give back to you. So it can feel very like lonely, which could be very true, which is why it's so important for like first time parents to be having like conversations with other adults and things like that, and not just being alone, like, and being caught up in like the world of a baby, because it can get very, very isolating. And so he's pointing this out, and she's starting to realize, well, even though all my friends are having kids, like they're actually not supportive to me. And even though she admits here, like, I don't want to live in Colorado, like that's a hard no, because Luke lives in the middle of nowhere. I don't exactly know where in Colorado he lives, but he's got a lot of land. And so he lives in the middle of nowhere. She doesn't want to live there, but she is starting to understand that maybe LA isn't the place for her. And so this is a big moment. So then it cuts up back to Big Bear, and the girls have gotten off the pontoon, and they kind of joined the boys on the beak. And like, Jesse's kind of putting Danny into a chokehold with a towel, and and it's Jesse's starting to get aggressive. And this is where Nia kind of is like, oh, ladies, in the last episode, she helped them with self-defense. And she's like, have you practiced your self-defense on everyone, on your husbands and boyfriends and stuff? And they're like, no, we haven't. And so this is where she kind of like, first Jax and Brittany kind of like are kind of playing it out, like how Brittany would defend herself if Jax was an attacker. And then it cuts to Jesse and Michelle doing it. And this is where we watch how, there's so many double standards here in this scene, where Michelle like actually slaps his face, which I don't like. And then of course, when he goes to put his hand across her face, now he doesn't slap her, but she claims he did. But when you watch the footage, he didn't. He kind of like his hand glides across her face, because he's trying to like, I don't know if he's trying to put his hand around her neck or what he's doing, like, as in someone who's going to attack her. But, she gets upset. She's like, oh, you hit my nose. And I guess she's had a nose job. And she's had a couple of nose jobs, and I guess it's been a year since her last one. So she's got to be really careful about it. But he didn't, like, when you look at the footage, he really didn't hit her. He didn't even get really that close to her. And she's like, yeah, you slapped me. And he's like, no, I didn't. You slapped me. And like, she slapped him actually a couple times. And, it's just, you're watching this couple like just take their aggression out on one another in a very covert way that is not covert. Like, it's very obvious what's going on here, and everyone can see it. And it's so obvious, and it's so difficult to watch. But anyways, then it cuts to Jax saying, Jax is also got his arm around Brittany, saying, I got to tell Jesse about the text message. She's like, yeah, you should probably talk to Michelle first. And, and eventually, like, Jesse needs to know because everyone else knows. And so, and then what we see is, I guess Brittany, because there's no kids on the trip, Cruz, Brittany and Jax's child, is being taken care of by their sitter, their nanny. And the nanny's been sending them all these videos of Cruz's swim lesson. And, I don't know, he's clearly like struggling in the water. He's having some good moments. He's having some bad moments. I mean, it's normal behavior. And of course there's moments where he's crying, and like Brittany's playing the video at full blast, and it's irritating Jax. And Jax is like, turn that off. And he's like, what are you doing? He's like, you stop playing that way. You got to play it. And the way that he's talking to her is so obnoxious and so disrespectful. And, poor Brittany, like, I mean, let's face it, you had to know what you were getting yourself into, Brittany. You're marrying this guy. Like, he's never been a good person. Jax has never been a good person. And, he may have tried to fool a lot of people and put on a good face. But what we're seeing in the Valley is that, no, Jax is the same old Jax, and he's an asshole. And Brittany is, she's breaking down. Like, he is just wearing her down over to the point where she's not allowed to have any feelings, and, she's the mother. She's watching her child cry. Like, it's upsetting her. And he's like, I don't want to hear my kid cry. I don't want to hear my kid cry. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like, everyone's got a dysfunctional marriage on this, like, show, except for Danny and Nia, I think. But of course we find out, like, they're going through it. They have 3 kids under 2 years old. So, 2 twins who are just newborns and are being breastfed. And then they've got like a 2-year-old. So they're under a lot of pressure, but they're a really cute couple. I've liked them from the beginning. And so then it cuts to, I think they're all getting ready to go back to Big Bear now. So they're going back to Big Bear. The girls get in the car together. The guys get in the car together. And instantly, Brittany's already like, oh my God, I'm getting car sick again. And so they have to pull over. She has to puke. And she's like, I'm really sorry, guys. And they're like, no, like, don't worry. Like, you do your thing. Like, it's okay, girl. And she's like, and she's like saying, like, don't tell Jax. And they're like, what? Like, she's like, I don't want him to know because he's going to think I was drinking and he's going to make it this big deal. And she's like, he's just going to make it hard for me. And I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. Could you imagine being married to a husband who, like, you're car sick and he's trying to blame it on alcohol? And then what it's likely is you're actually pregnant with his child. But here, like, I don't like how Jax is trying to, like, build Brittany, his wife, up, the mother of his child, up to be like this drunk or something. Like, okay, does she maybe not know how to handle her alcohol when she does drink? Yeah. But damn, man, like, if I was married to Jax, I'd probably be in the same boat as her. Oh boy. And so then it also cuts to the boys' car, and we see, Danny's trying to, like, get clear on him and Jesse, because Jesse was being really aggressive with him on the beach. He's like, I just want to make sure, like, are we on the same page? Like, are we cool, man? And he's like, yeah, no, like, you're just being sensitive. Like, and, you hear Jesse saying, like, hey, he's the most sensitive guy I've ever met, like, in the world. And it's like, no, Jesse, like, so you can see some of his a-hole behavior, like, really coming through in this moment. And it's like, he doesn't realize that what's happening here is something I actually went through in my 20s, where I can really understand what Jesse's going through, in a sense of he's battling his own demons right now. And I think the ayahuasca journey, just whatever he was doing a really good job of, like, pushing down and not really facing, now he has to face. And I think it's overwhelming him. and he's starting to take it out on the people that he actually cares about and who actually care about him. And I did the same thing when I was in my mid 20s and I found out that my boyfriend cheated on me and we ended up breaking up. And I was trying to get over it. I went through the darkest dark night of the soul. And you can tell, like, that's what Jesse's going through. He's going through a dark night of the soul here right now. And I would drink to numb the feelings, to pretend like the pain wasn't there. And I just, like, all I want to do is escape. All I want to do is, and even though I wasn't consciously really aware that that's what I was doing, but like looking back, I can totally see that's what I was doing. And I was like, I just want to move on. I just want to move on. And you can see that this is what he's doing. And I remember just drinking myself to a point where, like, I would start, like, really saying mean things to my girlfriends, like my closest friends who love me and I love them so much. And it finally took them having to, like, sit down with me and saying, like, hey, what's going on with you? Because you have a tendency to say these things when you're drunk. And it hit me. And that's when I was like, you know what? I have to stop drinking until I move through these feelings. And so I can see, like, that's what's going on here with Jesse, is that, he's starting to take it out on the people he loves. And it's just a really self-destructive behavior. It is because, like, he can't really take it out on Michelle. Because he's trying to salvage that relationship. And it's like I couldn't take it out on my ex because he was no longer around. And so you start taking it out on the people that are closest to you. And that's really what Jesse's doing here. And so, from an understanding of, like, yeah, he's going through a dark night of the soul. We all go there. We all have pain and trauma. I'm not condoning it by any means. I'm just saying, like, I understand, like, what's going on here. I can see it. And, and Danny's trying to say, like, he's trying to help his buddy out, but Buddy's not having it. Buddy's just being an asshole. And so they get into a big fight. And so anyways, they get home. Jesse runs up to his bedroom and just, like, goes into, like, cocoon mode. And, like, clearly the dude drank an entire bottle of tequila after having an ayahuasca and mushroom journey, I think, like 2 nights prior. And it's just like, yeah, no. And plus they're outside in the sun, and he's done the right thing. He has removed himself from the situation. But of course, everyone gets home and they're like, oh, let's all get into our comfies. Let's get into our sweats so we can all, like, just chill, which is the best thing ever, especially when you're with your friends. And, Jax and Michelle are in the kitchen, and Jax is like, okay, let's make margaritas. I'll make you a margarita. He knows I really need to talk to you. I really need to talk to you. And so this is where Jax wants to talk to Michelle about the text messages that he's claiming Kristen is spreading the rumors around. Meanwhile, it's Jax that is doing that. Jax is the one who told Kristen about it. But here he tells a little bit of a different story. So I don't know if this is true, but we also have seen a scene where he's also been the one to tell Kristen about this. So I don't know if he's made this scene up. I'm not really sure what's going on here. But basically, he makes the margaritas. They go outside to sit by the fire. And the way he's approaching this is so transparent. Like, Jax, you're not fooling anyone. This guy is dumber than dumb. Like, it doesn't take more than a semi-half-healed person to see what Jax is doing. A normal person who doesn't hang around the toxicity levels that is Jax can see what Jax is doing. And we all know that Jax is manipulating the situation to make it look like he actually cares about Michelle and he actually cares about Jesse. And he's trying to save them from the demon that is Kristen. And it's so ridiculous to watch. And so anyways, he's like, okay, he goes, I got to just get something off my chest. It's about Kristen. And I know I'll put my $20 in the jar, but you need to know this because she's saying things about you. And it's important that we discuss this, which is crazy. Again, because we all know, like, it's Jax who's been, like, spreading all this stuff. And so he basically, he sits her down and he's like, okay, well, 3 or 4 months ago, there was a girls' night at my house. And, like, you guys were all having fun. And then I came home and Kristen was there and she starts talking about how and then he's like, oh God, he's like, I hate doing this. And, and she's like, whatever, like, continue. And he's like, God, Kristen, she's the trash. She's the trash. She loves to just, she's the bottom of the barrel. She'll do whatever it takes to ruin someone's life. And I'm like, oh my God, Jax, it's like projection much? Like, this is watching projection to the max. Honestly, it makes me wonder if like Jax and Kristen didn't come from aren't like spawns of the same demon. Like, I don't know. Like, these two are just like, they've got to be cut from the same cloth somewhere. Like, somewhere down their ancestry line, there's a demon in there, because I don't think Kristen is as bad as Jax. I really don't. Like, Kristen isn't, but she's her own worst enemy. Anyways, I digress. So then Jax, he's just saying, she'll do whatever it takes to ruin other people's lives, which is, like crazy because, with a friend like Jax, who needs enemies? And so he proceeds on to saying, like, I just want you to get ahead of this because, and this is him trying to act like the hero. Like, I'm the good person. I'm the one who's going to make everything right in this group. I'm the one who's going to save the day. And, so he says, she's saying that, you're texting a particular person on the side. And so Michelle's like, well, I did tell her that, and that I met a celebrity and I was texting him and I had coffee with him one morning. And Jax just kind of looks and goes, well, she told me that you were texting with this one man. And then he pauses for, dramatic effect. And he's like, oh, I hate doing this, Michelle, but you were texting him sexy photos of yourself. And then Michelle looks at him and says, well, she's right. I have texted multiple people. And then it pauses, and that's where it ends. And so I feel like we're clearly missing some context of what she's talking about. I feel like they've done a good job editing this scene. I don't feel like this is exactly how the conversation went down, but basically, like, she's pulling the air out of his balloon, right? Like, she's completely deflating whatever drama Jax was trying to create in this moment. Now, I don't know exactly how the scene's going to go down. I mean, we looked at like the previews from next week, and we can see Jax is just going to get under fire from Brittany, because he's just making her to look like some alcoholic, which is just insane to me. Like, I don't understand how any husband can do that. Like, I don't know how he doesn't have any self-awareness of how he looks on TV. Like, this guy lacks so much self-awareness. I think he thinks the audience is as stupid as him. Like, I don't know what's going on here. But anyways, here we are. That's my recap of the Valley. And, it gives me some fun ways of actually recapping these reality shows in a way that kind of focuses in on some of the relationship dynamics, what's right, what's wrong, the healing things that people go through, why they're acting the way they are. So I'd love to know if you guys like enjoyed this show. Of course, I'm leaving the timestamps down here because it's a long 2-hour show. And, it's just fun. It's just fun for me to do this. This is just a whole new thing. And I think it's a great way for us to like kind of look at like, where do we go wrong? Where do we go right? And how do we have compassion for others on where they're at in their journey? Because that's part of the human like experience as well. So guys, let me know your thoughts. Please leave comments in the comments below. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Spotify, wherever you can leave a comment or a review, I'd love to know. And of course, don't forget, like, I'm not stopping my weekly episodes where I bring on a guest every Tuesday night, and I will be doing my live reality like inner reality call-in shows every other Thursday. So we did one last Thursday. If you missed it, definitely check it out. There were 3 people who called in and we looked at their scenarios. And so this is just a way for me to like take a side of me that does love to indulge in the reality TV sector. And yeah, I am a very spiritual person, and I love the realm of healing and personal growth and all that. But I also have some guilty pleasures, and that happens to be reality TV. And I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm a human. This is me. And this is also to say, like, a spiritual person isn't meant to come in any particular package. So whoever you are and whatever your spiritual journey is, like, just whatever it is, just stay true to you. Don't feel like you need to suppress parts of you. Like, you're a unique human being. Be you, be all of you. Like, a spiritual person doesn't need to walk around in white robes and, like, do like all these beads on them. Just do all the things that most people think a spiritual person needs to be. It's like, honestly, it's just be authentic. Be authentically you. That's the ultimate goal of this journey, is just to find out, who am I? And the only way to find out who you are is to be authentically you. So stop denying the parts of you that, people might be judgmental of, which is a huge issue, not just in spirituality, but religion in general. We have a tendency to judge others for not being on this path that you're supposed to be on. If you're, becoming more healed, opening your heart, being more loving. It's like, no, we can be all that. We can still be authentically ourselves and have our little guilty pleasures and do the things that are human. Like, you are a human. You're meant to have the human experience. So indulge in all the parts of you that feel right for you, that are authentically yours. All right, guys, I love you so much. Have an incredible week, and let me know. I'd love to know if you love this one. I'll see you guys soon. Thanks again for joining me for another show on the Enlighten Up podcast. I love you guys so much for all of your continued support. So remember to raise your vibe, find your tribe, and be open to the infinite possibilities held in the mysteries that surround us all. Thanks again for sharing the show with your family and friends. And if you're new to the show and you need to find out more information about me, please head on over to my website, NicoleFrolick.com, where you can join my newsletter. And please follow me on Instagram, Telegram, and YouTube. Keep your light bright, and I'll see you next week.